To continue on with the capacity analysis portion of the process flow for sales order entry, again, we're after the best possible promise date, the one we can keep. And in the future, we'll be using the due date as more of a guideline, where the promise date is the commitment. We've gone to the capacity review sub-process flow. We've run our open orders report. We've got the data in Excel. We've run an Excel macro. And now it's time to whittle down to the product family that we're focused on to determine the best possible due date. The best possible promise date. So let's go back to our Excel spreadsheet. We'll grab our test data. Simply paste data here. Run the macro. Establish our baseline chart of all open orders and capacity. A key point when we're looking at a product family is that the capacity values we're using in the chart are based on global factory capacities. In this case, we're going to focus on the 517. The 517 is metered by the inner shell, which produces roughly 6,500 units a day. So there are 3 days left in this week. We will be running this weekend. So we'll take the 6,500 units a day, multiply it by 3. We'll assume next week we'll run 6,500 units a day, but throttle back to 5 days. And then for every week going forward, for the balance of the 6-week capacity plan. So essentially we've established our capacity level at 32,500 units a week based on the bottleneck of the inner shell mold, and this information can easily be obtained by scheduling, particularly in a high demand product family like the 517. We'll then go back to our data. We'll scrub out all the product families above the 517. There'll be a few loose ends we'll have to check for. And then below the 517, we'll simply scrub them all out of the capacity plan. I'll take a quick look. You see a plus sign here. That means there's a few that we missed. We'll go ahead and get rid of them. And then we'll expand the 517, and we'll take a look and find that since it's sorted by product family, we've got a little bit of scrub to do there. So ultimately, the only product lines we should see in the product family are the 517. So now we have a rough cut 6-week 517 capacity based on open orders in the system currently, based on the summary of capacity, the input being the inner shell mold and its daily rate. And now we have a chart completely updated with exactly where we stand on requirements for the 517, where we stand on capacity for 517, then also the cumulative shortfall on 517, clearly showing that though capacity and demand for the week that we're focused on, week 43, is gotten better, because there's a cumulative shortfall, it'll be week 44 before we start seeing the light of day on our capacity for the 517. So by establishing the capacity, rough cut capacity, we should be able to make a confident promise date of week 44, assuming we get clear of all the past due work on the 517s in week 42 and week 43. Take a quick look at the calendar, figure out where week 44 is. If week 42 is this week, then obviously in our case it is November week 2. Then we'll have a better sense of understanding of whether or not we have the capacity to meet the demand for the order. It's a simple process. Takes a little practice to get used to. Very visual. So at this point in time, we've accomplished the output of the capacity chart. We can go back. We can take a look. And this is where we left off, reviewing the capacity chart. We find through capacity analysis that we do have capacity available. And the capacity should then equal the promise date. So essentially, we shouldn't make any more promises for the next 2 weeks for the 517 based on stated capacity, but 3 weeks out appears to have an opportunity. If the sales order gets into the system and the lead time is roughly 3 weeks out, that would be a good baseline to talk it out with scheduling and be sure when we accept a large order. We'll We'll go back to the process flow. We've accomplished some things, but the short version is it's very important to realize that most of what we did occurred after the planned order event. So all we're attempting to do now is determine a process date, enter the process date, and prevent forcing the due date. Forcing the due date takes away all the benefits of an automatically populated due date. If the due date is forced, then we lose the opportunity to gather valuable information and arrive at the guidance the system can give us. But since we've taken the time to do the rough cut capacity, we've made a promise that seems as though, based on factual data that we can keep, now we enter the promise date into the sales order form, and then we judge our on-time delivery against the promises we made to the customer. None of this prevents the order from progressing through the system, which is a very important point. A planned order leads to an action message, leads to an order schedule, leads to a work order, leads to a complete order, assuming we have the capacity. All we're attempting to do with this range of the process is to make sure that we have the capacity to keep the promise that we make, yet we don't stop the wheels turning while we're determining whether or not we can keep the promise. If we revisit the promise, or the process flow of the promise date, we find there are several decision gateways that should prevent us, or at least slow us down, and alert us much sooner in the cycle whether or not we're in trouble on a due date. We can make the choices, the phone calls, or some decisions well before the due date is becoming occur, and well before the promise date is broken, which is the most important step in the process. The last element I can review with you is how the due date is developed automatically by the system. Essentially, the system will be taking the manufacturing lead time, the shipping lead time, adding the two together, and populating the due date automatically in the system. So we'll shift our focus away from the due date, allow the system to manage the due date for us the way it was designed, and focus ourselves on the promise date. This is the key to the change. There's substantial logic in how the system operates, and essentially we're just taking advantage of the system's automation. I know this went fast. I know it's a lot of information. All the information is available electronically. We will have presentations. We will have a lot of opportunity to train before we implement the system. Yet, the sooner we can do it, the more effective we are, the better promises we can make, and the more likely it will be that we can keep the promises that we make. Thank you for the time.